Council meeting to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Francisco?
Here.
Hotchkiss?
Here.
House?
Here.
Self? Here. White? Here. Williams?
Here.
Mayor Schneider? Here. Item number 1, Employee Recognition Service Award Pins.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the council, as you know, every month we celebrate employees' important anniversaries with the city, and this month we're acknowledging several employees, and I'd like to read their names in the record, and we have one employee who's here to receive their pin in person. First, with 5 years, Joe Gonzalez, who's our Facilities Maintenance Supervisor in Public Works. Luciano Nungare, who's a ground maintenance worker in Parks and Rec. Mary Lou Chavez Sanobria, who's a waterfront maintenance worker at the waterfront. With 10 years, Adrian Gutierrez, police officer. Linda West, senior public works inspector. And Sean Martin, who's a water treatment plant operator in Public Works. With 20 years, Randy Webb, survey technician 2 in Public Works. 25 years, Doug Kresge, who's a police lieutenant. And with 30 years, it's Pep Marquez, who will receive his pin next month. He wasn't able to be here this month, and he's a water distribution supervisor in Public Works. And we have Sarah Dunn here, who's a senior library technician in the library, to receive her pin.
She'll get there. Okay, here's your pin.
Thank you very much.
If I can read this. To honor and give thanks, Sarah Dunn, Senior Library Technician, 30 years of service. Sarah Dunn began her career with the City of Santa Barbara in 1979 in an hourly position as a page in the Circulation Work Unit. Within a year of her hire, she became a full-time employee and was soon promoted to Circulation Supervisor. She then supervised the Library Systems Interlibrary Loan Unit for over 10 years. Sarah is currently supervising the Technical Services Unit, which oversees the processing and cataloging of all new materials, including books, DVDs, music CDs, etc. I guess there's a lot of etc.
There is.
Sarah has been integrally involved with the growth of technology at the library during her career. Sarah was in charge of the original conversion project in 1985 that created online records for every book in the library system and has played a key role in the migration of every online automated system to date. She has managed the day-to-day operations of the library automation system since its creation. Sarah's historical knowledge and expertise in data mapping has been invaluable to all jurisdictions in the Black Gold Cooperative Library System and has enabled the cooperative to continually improve on the library's catalog and management of automated functions and library user records. Sarah is currently the library's P3 advisor, and with her keen eye for statistical analysis, she helps the library immeasurably by providing data for reporting and planning. I think Mr. Armstrong might have written that part of it for the P3. Sarah has worked under 3 library directors, Robert Hart, Carol Cater, and the current director, Irene Macias. She is currently the second longest active library staff member. Sarah, it's my pleasure to honor you today for 30 years of service to the City of Santa Barbara. On behalf of the City Council, we congratulate you on your admirable achievement. Congratulations. There you go.
Yes, indeed I have. Well, it's been a very interesting 30 years plus more or less one. When I started, indeed, we were not automated. We were in Paulson's furniture store in a very small spot. I was working along with the currently longest-serving library staff in person, who is Myra Nicholas, the library services manager for public services. And we've been through some really good times. We've been through hard times. We're currently in the hardest I've ever seen working with the city. But I remember very overqualified, well-educated people out of jobs looking for page jobs in the early 1980s. People have been through hard economic times before. I've worked with many wonderful people at the library. My fellow employees are a marvelous bunch. They come from all sorts of backgrounds. They've all got all sorts of different senses of humor. As I'm looking at Hong here. And it's really been a wonderful, wonderful time, and I've appreciated my time with the city very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we have public comment. I have a few speakers. Darlena Moore will be followed by Ken Locke, and I have 2 minutes up on the dais here.
Greetings. I'm going to share with you a few words by singing. People make the world go round. On October 6, 2009, and January 26, I came before City Council because I was very concerned for not only the homeless in general, but homeless veterans here in Santa Barbara based on my own personal experience. Today I went before the Board of Supervisors, and I again come before you today. On September 23, 2009, there was a write-up in the Daily Sound newspaper regarding the U.S. government directing funds to the homeless agencies by way of the stimulus package to 2 agencies here in Santa Barbara that are supposed to help the homeless. The county supervisors of Santa Barbara had approved for the 2 agencies to get over $400,000 in funds distributed between these 2 agencies to help the homeless. On October 22, 2009, I wrote a letter to the editor of the Daily Sound regarding my concern upon reading the article based on my own, again, personal experience. Based on my own experience, I just want to ask a couple of questions. I just hope that how I was treated as a veteran, I hope that that's now not how other homeless veterans who are serving their country presently are going to be treated if found to be in a homeless situation. And what about those veterans who are single mothers that might have a loved one in the family with a disability in need of assistance? Now, we just did a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. There is a serious crisis of homelessness here in Santa Barbara. I had never experienced homelessness until I came here to Santa Barbara, and I thought I was going to literally die during the process. Being homeless
10
is
seconds.
no joke. I just want to end by reminding that I know that money does not grow on trees, but it definitely is made from trees. And on every dollar bill it says, "In God we trust." I just ask that we as not only American people, but as human beings come together and help the homeless population, not only veterans, but just the homeless in general.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Ken Locke will be followed by David Daniel Diaz.
My name is Kenneth Locke. I want to talk about the concept of a merging market. This economy is in bad need of merging markets that actually can kind of provide tax revenue to keep this baby afloat. But I'm sorry to say that we're going to have a merging economy. We're going to replace this current economy with a better system. And what I'm bringing to the table is the whole idea of a reformation of education into the interdisciplinary. I'll probably go before the school board tonight and kind of promote this so that our education that provided to the kids kind of prepares them for this emerging economy. And it's kind of like I came into this intelligence. It's based on a higher level of intelligence. On my website, I have the address kennethlocke.net, and also I'm on YouTube. But I'm talking about it's interdisciplinary, and also the basis of like understanding the connection between disciplines. A lot of people probably don't understand the connection that tennis has with yoga. You don't have any knowledge of how those two disciplines are interrelated. The way to understand how they're interrelated requires you to actually understand the whole basis of a mind-body integration. So again, if you don't have the understanding of the mind-body integration, you're not going to understand how tennis and yoga. I've gone by a few of the tennis shops and I've actually made them aware of this emerging market for tennis so that it actually can incorporate itself with yoga and all disciplines. It's an interesting concept, and again, I'll be going before the school board this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. David Daniel Diaz, and then I don't know if it's Jack or Ruth Wilson. It just says prayer on it, but I'm assuming it's Ruth. Okay. How did I guess that?
Okay, here we go. Hi, Santa Barbara. First of all, something happened at the county parks today that affects lands where indigenous grave sites or cultural sites might be. Someone slipped in between two park benches up at Hammond's Meadow. The city was happy to say they had nothing to do with it. Apparently, that's a cemetery site for Chumash Indians, and in part of the agreements, nothing was to be put on this area unless it went into consultations with the local natives. And we had a big meeting. Indians from back in the 70s helped create these laws that affect the entire state where Indian sites may be. We're there, and the county's backtracking, and they're going to be removing the benches. But this is just a reminder on any lands, public lands where there's Indian sites and things, make certain everybody's on board because there are laws and bylaws that need to be followed and respected. Secondly, I know there's a recession and we're going through a lot of changes. Mental health-wise, I know we have one of the best systems in the country for families and kids. Talking to directors and tourists from all around the country and world that come here. We do, and I've traveled around a lot, and we do have one of the best systems here in this city. I'm very proud that we do. And now the commercial side. Kahuna Grill has what they call Bounce Back Mondays. A free combo. If you buy one, you get one free. And Dale gave me some coupons to give to all of you up on the board because we're going through recession and pennies count. So he's just contributing to helping out the community in a good way. So I'll leave this with the gentleman over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last speaker will be Ruth Wilson.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I am a member of the silent generation, otherwise sometimes known as the greatest generation. My parents were very badly affected by the Depression, and so I was reared to be practical, down to earth, and I heard things like, a penny saved is a penny earned, waste not, want not. But the greatest thing about this generation was they really turned to God and they sought the wisdom of God. And today I think we need to be very practical and down to earth and, not have a lot of fluff. And I think that we need to be mindful of God's least, the least, how we treat the least. And I also want to mention to you that we have a source of great power because when Jesus died and rose again from the dead, he appeared to over 500 of his followers. And he said to them, I must leave you and go home to the Father because then I can send you the Holy Spirit to indwell you, to guide and direct you. And so I lift you up right now in prayer, and I ask that the Holy Spirit blow through here, this council room, this community of Santa Barbara, that we would be drawn in the right direction and follow what God has in mind for us. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Thank you. That will close public comment. And we have on to the consent calendar. I believe there's some items to read.
Item number 3, adoption of medical marijuana suspension ordinance. Recommendation, the council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara extending a temporary suspension of the right to apply for or to obtain a permit for the opening or operation of medical marijuana dispensaries otherwise permitted by the Santa Barbara Municipal Code, Chapter 28.80, on an interim basis. Item number 4, introduction of ordinance for renewal of recycled water user agreements. Recommendation that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara approving 3 20-year agreements to use recycled water between the city of Santa Barbara and 1, Santa Barbara Community College District, 2, El Escorio Owners Association, and 3, California Department of Transportation, each dated as of February 2nd, 2010. And item number 7, support of the Highway 101 High Occupancy Vehicle Widening Project. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara supporting the Highway 101 High Occupancy Vehicle Widening Project as Santa Barbara County's highest regional transportation priority for federal funding.
Thank you. And we'll waive further reading. I have speaker slips on items 3 and 8. Are there any other items we'd like to take off the consent calendar? Okay, why don't you read number 3, remind us which one that is. You read it. It's the adoption of the medical marijuana suspension ordinance. So I have 2 speakers, Nikolai Lambert to be followed by B. Nelson.
Hello, Madam Mayor. Hello, Council. I'm here to address concerns over where the dispensaries get their materials. Due to the fire we had last week, it was discovered that they were manufacturing marijuana oil to be sold in a local dispensary. Now, that needs to be done away with. We need to see where our products come from and make sure this doesn't happen again.
Thank you. And then B. Nelson will be the last speaker on this item 3.
Madam Mayor and City Council, I want to say I approve of the moratorium you're doing. I think you should extend it to the ones that opened illegal and non-conforming, because it seems like they've had enough time. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Short to the point, I like it. Okay. And then why don't we move to item number 8?
Item number 8, set a date for public hearing regarding appeal of the Planning Commission approval for 3714 to 3744 State Street.
Okay, Ms. Kovacs.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm not used to coming about consent calendar items. I am here, though, as Naomi Kovacs, Executive Director of the Citizens Planning Association, because we are one of the 2 co-appellants in this matter. And I wanted to point out that the description of our appeal is actually inaccurate on your consent calendar today. So we're requesting that you please remove it from the consent calendar, correct that before you go forward with adopting your consent calendar. To clarify, the letter of the appeal that we actually filed, the actual subject line reads that our appeal is of Planning Commission's certification of the final EIR for the Sandman Inn redevelopment project and of the subsequent approval of the latest version of the project on December 17, 2009. Your consent calendar, though, as you note and you just heard, does not cover the scope of our appeal. It completely left out the issue of CEQA adequacy in process, which is actually a big piece of our appeal. So again, we ask that you correct that, and we'd also like reassurance that, or assurance that the materials that are prepared for your March 9th hearing, if that's the date that you choose to set this hearing for, that those do not echo the incorrect description of our appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kovacs. Mr. Wiley, could you give us some suggestion here? We've been asked to take this out of and correct what's on the how it's listed on the consent calendar and not vote on it with the others. If you could,
Madam Mayor, I have to confess I'm not following the change that Ms. Kovacs is requesting, because my suggestion is that we simply make that change today.
So we could vote on it separately and incorporate the language that. And is that what you're suggesting, Ms. Kovacs? Okay. So that's the suggestion, that we move on item 8 separately to include I want to include the correct language, the language that pertains to the appeal letter from Citizens Planning Association and Allied Neighborhood Association. So that's the request. Before any discussion, questions on that? Would someone like to make a motion to?
I'll move that, Madam Mayor. That we adopt the language that accurately describes what the appeal.
So go ahead, Mr. Wiley.
I'm sorry, perhaps Ms. Kovacs could give us what she's asking for? So that
referencing the CEQA issue.
we're setting a date for, the address is correct, I assume. And maybe just at the end of the sentence, we would add the language regarding the certification of the final EIR for the Sandman Inn redevelopment project and of the subsequent approval of the latest version of the project on December 17th, 2009 by the City Planning Commission. So that would be added at the end of the first sentence of recommendation A.
Okay?
Okay,
The motion
so
and
moved.
seconder okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Okay, I believe we also want another item off the consent, is that right, Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about item 6.
Item 6, which, do you want to read item 6?
Sure. Item number 6, contract for final design of Elings Park landfill gas collection and control system.
Great, Mr. Williams.
You know, the question that I had in looking at the staff report is that this pertains to the collection of landfill gas from Elings Park, which used to be a landfill. It looked like there was that the gases would be collected but then destroyed in a chamber. Is that just because there's so little gases it's not economically efficient to use it as a fuel?
Mr. McIntosh.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Williams, Stephen McIntosh, I'm the Environmental Services Supervisor. That's correct. There's anticipated to be very little gas. The Waste Board senior scientist that came down and visited the site most recently said there won't be enough gas to do anything other than just destroy it.
And that just, like, this is a project that's going to be $800,000, and it's just, that's a lot of funds for not being able to use it. I suppose we need to do this just simply because of the air quality aspects of the leaking methane as well as the fact that if we destroy it, then probably the byproduct is CO2 rather than methane, which is not as bad.
That's essentially correct. We did look at the waste mass and talk to our consultants when we were doing a preliminary design of this project, and it turned out that if we were to even consider doing some sort of a cogeneration facility, which I think is what you're suggesting, we would have to plumb the entire 26-acre parcel, and it would be probably a couple $1 million versus $500,000 or $600,000, and we at that point may not even get enough gas to run a turbine.
Okay, so you don't need to vote on
No,
that
I don't want to
separately.
vote on it separately. I just wanted to do due diligence and ask the questions.
Okay.
Move consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second, but is that
Minus 8.
minus item 8?
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, consent calendar passes. Thank you. Okay, neither the Ordinance nor Finance Committee met, so we are up to item number 11.
Item number 11, restoration of Parma Park and appropriation of Parma Park trust funds.
Thank you. Ms. Zachary.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, with today's presentation, we'd like to give you a status report of the restoration work at Parma Park, and then also ask Council to accept funds from the Parma Park Trust. My name is Jill Zachary. I'm the Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. I will be making today's presentation. I also have Santos Escobar, our Parks Manager, and Kathy Fry, our Natural Areas Planner, here, if there are questions that they are better able to answer. They've been very involved in this project. Parma Park was deeded to the city in 1973 by the Parma family, and the Parma Park Trust was established in 2000. So every year we do come to Council and ask for Council to appropriate funds that the Trust has dispersed to the city for the purpose of maintenance of Parma Park. Parma Park is one of 11 of our open space parks. It's about 200 acres. It's located in the Sycamore watershed. And as you can see from this slide, the park is in green. Up here is the Los Padres National Forest, and it is essentially part of the headwaters of Sycamore Creek and the tributaries to Sycamore Creek. It's characterized by very steep slopes, and as I mentioned, it has a number of tributaries. It also has been home to oak woodland, grasslands, and riparian habitat. And it's a place where hikers and equestrians, and to some extent mountain bikers on the fire roads, enjoy essentially a passive open space experience. Parma Park was entirely within the T-Fire area. About 1,600 acres of the Sycamore Creek watershed burned in the fire. Parma Park represents 12% of those acres. And as you can see again, it being at the top of the watershed, that created a lot of concern for the downstream impacts as well as in the park itself. About 95% of the park was completely burned. What I'm going to do now is show you some photos, sort of a before and after, to remind ourselves it's been 12 months since the fire, so there has been some change, and then go into the bulk of today's presentation, which is really to provide an update on the unique opportunity that the fire provided, both to the department and to the community for the park. So this is a view of the park before the fire, and this is just after the fire. Our riparian areas were similarly damaged, as were our oak woodlands. As you can imagine, once upon a time, this was a nice shady area that had a lot of tree cover. Just like other agencies, soon after the fire, we went to inspect what was going on and began some preliminary response. Our department was primarily involved in creek debris removal, some mulching efforts in the areas that were less steep, and then also working with the County Flood Control District. There was an old debris basin. If you've been up Stanwood, you'll see they've excavated a massive debris basin. And we also worked with our colleagues in Public Works where they installed a debris rack, all focused on, as we might remember, that within a week after the fire there was a potential for a significant storm event and a lot of concern about mudslides and debris and downstream flooding. Part of what we did while we were doing that initial reconnaissance and our staff were out working is we began developing a restoration plan. And as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we are very fortunate to have the Parma Park Trust. And as a result, the work that goes on at Parma Park is unlike any work we're able to do in any other open space park. We met with our trustee, which we do on an annual basis, and we proposed to our trustee that we take advantage of this opportunity and initiate a broad restoration program. We've been talking about it and chipping away at it, bits and pieces over the years, and we realized that here was an opportunity. We proposed a 3-phase program, and we picked 2.5 years based on the knowns and unknowns that we had at the time. Our first 6 months were really focused on removing hazards to reopen the park. The park was closed until April. Dealing with some preliminary rehabilitation efforts that we could initiate, and then looking at long-term restoration. So native plant restoration, similar to what we do in our creek areas, which we don't often have the opportunity to do in our other open space areas. Our Parma trustee approved our use of funds for this. We also were able to leverage funds from the state and FEMA disaster funds. And in April, we applied for, with the assistance of the Workforce Investment Board, a grant called a National Emergency Grant from the Department of Labor. So it actually was a federal funding source that went through the state to the county and then ultimately to us for this project. And what that enabled us to do, because each funding source had different objectives and different criteria, is to cobble everything together to put together the plan and the work effort that we did over the last 14 years. Specifically, I'd like to mention the National Emergency Grant because what this provided to us is essentially labor. The focus of the grant was to hire unemployed people or people who had been unemployed as a result of the fires to work in areas that have been affected by the disasters. So Parma Park was a perfect fit. We were able to hire 11 hourly workers. They were able to work up to $12,000 income, so their hourly wage limited how many hours, and they were intended to rehabilitate an area that was affected by the fire. The funding was made available for all of the Southern California wildfire disaster areas, because obviously other areas in Southern California were significantly impacted. And as I mentioned earlier, really this was made possible because we worked with the County Workforce Investment Board, and we worked together to get that funding. And labor is one of the things that you need more than anything of when you're trying to deal with non-native vegetation, and also work under an integrated pest management program, which limits the use of pesticides. I'd like to highlight a couple of elements of what we've done recently, just to give you an illustration. There was a large eucalyptus grove in Parma Park that was badly burnt. Because those trees were a hazard, FEMA paid for those trees to be removed. So this shows you what they look like prior to removal. And this is what it shows look afterwards. FEMA funds wouldn't cover the stump grinding, which is something we needed to do to prevent further eucalyptus trees from sprouting, but the Parma Park Trust paid for the stump grinding. And then similarly, as I mentioned and will in a following slide, when you have seeds that have been burnt by fire, they're more likely to regenerate. Well, we had 11 staff that could pick up eucalyptus seeds because we had lots of labor in order to do that. And that's something that we don't have that kind of resource in any of our parks. And this is a photo of the crew in the same location. As I mentioned, focus of the work was non-native vegetation removal. One of the things we'd always wanted to do at Parma Park was tackle some of the non-native vegetation. Very labor intensive under an IPM program. But here, with the grant that we had, we were able to direct folks. And this photo shows castor bean that they collected. And most of us see castor bean all over the place. And once it flowers, you're in trouble if you can't catch it before it does that. So they spent a lot of time doing that. In fact, we estimate we spent 2,300 hours over the summer just dealing with non-native eradication at the park. Metal removal is another thing. Parma Park used to be covered by a significant amount of vegetation. It was a ranch at one time. And with the fire, all of a sudden barbed wire showed up, metal showed up. If you even go to areas of the Jesucita fire and the trails, you'll see old irrigation pipes that just all of a sudden appear because now you can see it. The staff were able to remove all of that pipe and reduce that hazard at the park. They spent 800 hours doing that type of work. Trail restoration, we got some initial funding from FEMA to do trail restoration, and then we had our NEG staff go through 2 times, so 2 times 5 miles, 10 miles of trails work over the summertime. This shows you before, and this shows you after. That's one of the things we do on an annual basis. We were able to do a lot more trail work with this funding, and we'll be able to do it again next year. One of the things that was really exciting, a tragedy, but also turned into a wonderful opportunity, is the park has a 100-year-old olive grove that was planted by the Parma family. Not something one would expect in a native environment, but a cultural resource to the park. It's part of the history of the park. It was significantly burned in the fire, and through working with Craig Michaela of Santa Barbara Olives and then our forestry staff, we identified the opportunity to actually salvage the wood. And so the wood was salvaged by a contractor, and then we had it milled, and we had the milled wood turned into trail signs. And we actually have a sample sign that will leave in Mayor and Council office for a week or so if you want to take a look at it. So it was an opportunity. So throughout Parma Park, all of our signs now are made of the olive grove, and we have some benches and some picnic tables that are also under construction. And again, here's an example of where we had the labor to install all of those signs. We installed 35 signs. The other thing that we were able to do is we're rehabilitating the olive grove. And that's something that's very labor intensive, as you can imagine. Once the stumps were removed and determined that actually a number of trees were still viable, we had some training from Mr. Michaela on how to rehabilitate the trees. Here's an example of all the suckers that grew, and they spent many hours removing the ones that wouldn't become the leaders, and we'll be able to do that probably 1 or 2 more times with these staff. 600 hours spent just managing an olive grove, and all focused on the park and for the purpose of restoring it. Looking ahead to 2010, which is partly why this is on your agenda, we're appropriating some additional funds from the trust. We're going into our second year. We have some funds left from our NEG grant, so we'll hire a whole nother crew of staff, new staff, for 3 months to continue non-native eradication. We'll be moving into planting of native trees and shrubs. We'll be having some community planting day opportunities in the fall, and then the additional work that we do. Funding for 2010, we're estimating we'll spend about $139,000, of which the Parma Trust will provide just over $83,000. And as your staff report outlines, the maintenance account for the park is adequately funded. And that concludes today's presentation.
Thank you. What a great partnership each and every year, but a great way to look at opportunities when they come out of tragedy like the Tea Fire. Mr. Williams, did you have a question?
Sure. Couple questions. How much do we pay these folks, and why is this not a prevailing wage job?
Ms. Zachary?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Williams, the staff are paid according to city's classification, and it was a grounds maintenance worker 1 position. We did get approval to hire 2 of the 11 as more senior staff, and they were hired at a higher salary and were able to supervise. It had to be consistent with what the city's guidelines are, and we also hired them as temporary employees.
And is that why you would hire new staff to continue the project and not continue the old?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Williams, yes, they worked close to the 1,000-hour limit that the city has for hourly workers, and up to their $12,000 limit that the grant guidelines had.
So part of it is the grant only allowed $12,000 per person, which makes 0 cents for California, right? Maybe for the rest of the nation, but 0 cents for us. Okay, all right. That's too bad. The continuous work would be continued to be out of that grant or out of the trust?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Williams, we have 6 months left in the grant, or actually 5 through June 30th, so we will spend that $55,000 of the grant first on the staffing, and then after that we will turn to the Parma Park Trust for subsequent funding, unless we find other sources of funds. And one of the things that this provided us also an opportunity with is to begin working more with the one-stop shop at Employment Development Department, and we're looking at opportunities of short-term labor opportunities to put people back to work.
Well, I definitely don't fault you because you're working with the confines of a grant, but the idea of this money is to try to reduce unemployment. Well, having people and then for a couple months and then firing them at hourly wages, which are already low, is not exactly the best strategy for keeping people at work in this county or anywhere else in the state of California. So I would just encourage you that if you were pleased with this crew and the work that this crew did, that you try to run the programming and funds of the rest of the grant and the trust at the same time, so that you can make that work kind of continuous, because it makes a whole lot more sense both for the work product at the park and for the interests of keeping people working, and not just intermittently for a couple months at a time, to have those people employed continuously when possible.
Okay, Mr. Hotchkiss?
Yes, hi, thanks for the report. Were these all local people? Do we try to hire local people, Santa Barbara residents?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, yes.
Great. And as I look at it here, it looks like none of these funds came from the city. Is that correct?
That's correct. They had to come from outside of the city. They couldn't be existing city employees.
Okay. In the process of doing all the non-native species work, is there anything that didn't get done that you would like to have been done?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, there's always more work to do at Parma and in any open space area, primarily because from a seasonal basis, things continue to grow. We have a significant seed bank in the soil that will come back. So, yes, there's more work to be done. We got a lot more work than we anticipated because we had the staff to do the work.
Right, I understand. Sometimes do you feel like when you're dealing with these non-native species that you're trying to push water uphill? It's always going to come back.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, it is a challenge. We do, in certain instances, when it is a very noxious species, ask for an exemption to try to achieve something because we know we'll never get it otherwise, but we try to limit that.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. House?
I think it was just a remarkable project. The comment about collecting the seeds from the eucalyptus just was pretty incredible. But the idea, of course, is to avoid more work in the future. And I can just imagine being in that project looking for those seeds. In regards to the protection against soil erosion and possible flooding downstream, how much ground do you think you took in terms of stabilizing things and making it better for the future? I mean, the report suggests that there's more to be done, but how far did you get?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember House, in the beginning, we did hire a firm to apply mulch similar to what was applied in the lower areas after the Jesucita fire. At Parma Park, it's the opportunities are limited because the slopes are so steep, and so we focused on areas that we thought there would be the most benefit. I think we got lucky, in part because we didn't have a significant rainfall last winter. Over the last year, the park has rejuvenated, things have sprouted. That will support soil over time. We looked at a number of different methods. If you see straw wattles or you see jute netting on hillsides, and determined in a lot of cases that the amount that we'd have to put out there for the potential lack of benefit exceeded really moving forward with that. So Parma Park has been subject to landslides even without a fire situation, just like portions of the Sycamore watershed. So I think we feel confident that we're in a good place, and it could have been a lot different had we had a lot more rain.
Right. This rain that we just had, did it hold up pretty well?
Yes.
Okay, really good. Do we need a motion for this?
Yes, we do. We have money to increase appropriations. That's always a good thing to...
Well, I'll move that we increase appropriations and estimated revenues by the amount here, $71,288 in 2010, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I want to thank you for the report and again, appreciate the partnership we have with the trust, and it's always great to see these kind of partnerships come together and see this report happen. And to the trail, I love the idea of reusing the olive grove wood for keep it on site in a different use, so that's fantastic. Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. Move on to item number 12.
Item number 12, pilot program for digestion of fats, oil, and grease at the El Estero wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, switching staff here. Great. Dewey, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm here to introduce our Grease to Gas pilot project at El Estero. Essentially, in a nutshell, what this project does is it takes a product that needs to be disposed of outside of this area and converts it to methane gas that can be used to generate electricity and heating for the processes at El Estero. First slide. So why are we doing this? This project really provides three main benefits. It helps to cut the cost of operations of the plant by offsetting electricity cost and natural gas prices and the cost of natural gas. It also provides a benefit to the local business community. The business community now has to dispose of this material outside of the county in places like Bakersfield and Fresno, so you have to pay for the hauling costs for that. This will give them, local businesses, an opportunity to dispose of this material in town. And the third benefit is it will increase revenue for the El Estero plant. So we'll be charging tipping fees or disposal fees to handle this product, and that will provide revenues for operations and for the capital upgrades to the plant. Next, I'd like to introduce our two presenters. The first...
Sorry.
I think when we went through this, we talked about that we were going to keep on this slide before I was introducing our presenters. But anyway, our first presenter is Chris Toth. He's our newly hired wastewater system manager. He comes to us from the city of San Diego, where he served for 26 years in their wastewater department in various high-level capacities, including deputy director. He's a professional civil engineer, and he has a master's degree in civil engineering from San Diego State University. And our second presenter, Alelia Parento, many of you know. She came over to facilities. She works as our energy analyst from the solid waste division. And I'm really happy to have her because she's really helped me to kick the energy program into high gear, and she's also helping to manage large projects such as this pilot project and the energy efficiency and community block grants. So without further ado, Mr. Toth.
Welcome.
Madam Mayor, council members, delighted to start my career off with this first slide. It shows a greasy pipe, and the grease depicts fat, soil, and grease, which we call in the industry fog material. It's bad for us in our sewer system. It comes from all of our residences, but primarily it can come from food establishments, restaurants, which cook a lot of food and then dispose of a lot of grease. Fog causes us a lot of problems in the sewer system. It coats our pipes and sticks and congeals. That results in blockages, so regular sewage can't get through the pipes. Results in extra maintenance for our staff. They have to clean pipes more frequently. And if we can't get to the pipe in time, the grease deposits could cause a blockage and sewer spills within our sewer system. This slide depicts sort of a schematic of a typical restaurant kitchen. The red box to the lower left is a grease trap or a grease interceptor tank. These tanks can be anywhere from 50 gallons in size to 2,000 gallons in size, depending upon the volume of the restaurant, how much food they prepare and serve. You see there that some of the kitchen sinks and other appurtenances are connected directly to the grease trap, and others aren't. The ones that are the kitchen sinks that we believe are most likely to be a source of grease in the commercial kitchen, and that the grease from those devices, those sinks, then gets into the grease trap. The grease floats to the top and sits in the top of the tank where it collects, allowing the rest of the sewage to go into our sewer system, and then the grease tank periodically needs to be pumped by a grease hauler. We have 277 miles of sewer system in the city of Santa Barbara, approximately 350 restaurants. So regionally, in the Tri-County area, we estimate we're producing as much as 20,000 gallons of fog material per day. Within the city itself, we're producing as much as 5,000 gallons of fog material per day. And as Mr. Dewey said, these materials currently are hauled to distant locations from the city of Santa Barbara because we have no way to actually treat or process the fog material here. Again, the materials are hauled away from the city of Santa Barbara. Typically, they can go as far as Bakersfield, Watsonville, Los Angeles, Fresno, places far away. They're typically disposed of in landfills. unless the grease hauler has made some other arrangement at a distant processing site. The last bullet here talking about the CO2 emissions being estimated at 17 metric tons per day. That's representative of what would happen with this fog material if it is put into a landfill where it sits and decomposes. And then the landfill generates landfill gas, and that additional grease or fog material could generate as much as an additional 17 metric tons per day, approximately that much. So an overview of what we're talking about at the El Estero Wastewater Treatment Plant is to have a fog hauler collect fog from local restaurants and other smaller fog haulers and deliver it to the El Estero Wastewater Treatment Plant. Our staff would then be tasked with using the equipment at El Estero that we're proposing as a part of this project to inject that fog material into our digesters at the treatment plant. And then the short story is that we would produce additional methane, additional digester gas. So one of the big questions may be, how does digestion work at El Estero? And it's actually very similar to the digestive processes within the human body. Instead of our bodies, we're talking about two large anaerobic digesters, two big tanks filled with a liquid and solids from the wastewater treatment process. In those tanks are bacteria that are living and thriving at about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So they're in a nice warm environment, and they are eating the food in the tank, which consists primarily, again, of wastewater solids, and we'll be injecting this fog material into those tanks to be eaten by the bacteria along with the other wastewater solids. From that, they'll be producing additional methane gas and carbon dioxide gas, and then that gas we hope can be used for electrical generation. So the alternatives that have been looked at involved a lot of different processes. We looked at the opportunity for restaurants and small fog haulers to work directly with El Estero and take their individual kitchen fog material to El Estero. We looked at different processes involving how much preliminary treatment would have to be done, chopping, grinding the fog material, heating the fog material, screening the fog material before it gets to El Estero, or should city staff do that at El Estero themselves. We looked at other agencies that have been involved with this type of process, specifically City of Millbrae, City of Riverside, East Bay Mud, or Municipal Utility District, and the City of Watsonville. And from all that study, our city staff came up with the best of the best in terms of what we're proposing to do with this fog pilot project. And that's really what we're going to be proposing to you now. With that, I'm just delighted to introduce again Alelia Parentu, our Public Works Energy Analyst, who's going to present our proposed fog pilot project.
Hi, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm here to talk about the best of the best. And today we're here to propose this fog pilot project, which would involve planning, designing, and constructing the injection system. We would need to hire a contractor to do so, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And we anticipate that city staff would operate and maintain this facility for approximately 2 years once constructed. That would be the amount of time we would need to collect an appropriate amount of data for a larger scale project. We anticipate that design will be complete by the end of fiscal year 2010 and that construction will be complete by the end of fiscal year 2011. The purpose of the pilot is first and foremost to collect data. We don't currently know how much gas will be produced with fog injection or what the quality or heat value of that gas will be. So we wanted to give ourselves ample time to analyze that. It will also help us understand contractual requirements. We've never had a relationship like this with fog haulers, and we'd like to know what parameters we need to put into a contract. We intend to enter into a public-private partnership with Marburg Industries for the fog hauling. Marburg would be responsible for collecting a predetermined amount of grease, taking it to their own facility for pre-treatment, and then bringing it to El Estero at a consistent rate for injection. They will also pay a tip fee at a per gallon rate to the city, which, as Mr. Dewey said, would help with plant revenue. In return, El Estero staff would be responsible for the delivery or accepting deliveries of the fog, for maintaining the system, and for collecting data. Our basis for selecting Marburg, we have several reasons for this. One is simply their proximity to El Estero. They're right around the corner, and we saw that as a benefit to the project. Also, because of their septage service, they have familiarity with similar operating or pretreatment equipment, very similar to the fog pretreatment equipment we're going to be requiring. And the project will require a significant infrastructure investment, and Marburg has indicated that they're willing to take this on to be part of the pilot project. For the system design, the city is considering the engineering firm AECOM. They have already given us a scope of work for project requirements, including a technical memorandum to identify the processes and required steps to get to this fog injection system. They would also include a design and specifications for the system, as well as bid phase services and construction phase services. Bid phase services would be review of bid submittals and answering any questions that came our way. And construction phase services would include on-site services such as inspections and ensuring that equipment is appropriate for the system. We chose AECOM because last year they provided us with an air quality study for this specific project, which means that they're incredibly familiar with the project and El Estero, the project site, and that helps them understand what we're trying to do here. They've also designed similar systems for other jurisdictions, including these ones listed here, East Bay Mud, City of Calgary, and City of Madera, which gives them significant experience and an understanding of the process. To reiterate, a few actually larger fog project benefits would include operational cost savings, which would translate into savings for the ratepayers, provide a local grease disposal site, which would negate long-distance trips to dispose of this material, and reduce hauling costs that we're hoping would equate to lower prices for restaurant owners, business owners, and the community. So today our recommendations for council are that you authorize the Public Works Director to execute a professional services agreement with AECOM for both design services and construction services, and authorize the Public Works Director to negotiate and execute with an agreement with Marburg Industries for the fog hauling. This would be revisited for the larger project. It would be a competitive process for fog hauler. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any public comment slips for this, no? Questions, Mr. Williams? If you want to put in public comment, you need to submit a slip, please.
Well, first I wanted to tell you that this is a great project. This is something that will be an incredible boon for local restaurant owners and can help boost our energy output at El Estero considerably. My only question is it just that these other projects are also pilot projects, and that's why we can't learn from other pilot projects enough to go straight to a full-scale facility, or is it that different communities have different mixes of fog materials? Essentially, my question is, why can't we just build the real thing? Why do we have to build two different projects to do this right?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Williams, while it's good to visit other municipalities and see how they operate their facilities, we still don't have the experience ourselves on operating this. There are a lot of unknown variables just with the technical processes at the wastewater treatment plant. We also have logistical issues just getting the fog materials from the hauler to our facility in a tank, and then determining what level of heat and mixing and potential additional screening and chopping we have to do. So the pilot project for us is a new learning curve. We estimate that it's probably going to take our operations staff maybe an additional 60 hours a month to work with this process in addition to their other tasks, and we estimate approximately 20 hours of additional staff time for routine maintenance of this facility. We'd like to start smaller. Our current permits with APCD require that we start at this size and no larger. And so it could be that this facility is with us for a while before we contemplate expanding it. So for all those reasons, we've elected to kind of keep it at this size, call it a pilot project, restrict fog haulers' access to it, so we're only dealing with one fog hauler and the logistics and accepting their trucks on a regular daily basis, and just learn from the experience before we try to scale up.
Is this the largest capacity that APCD allows us at this time?
With our current permit.
Well, I think that this is obviously what our best electricity generator in the city right now is El Estero with our current fuel cell technology, and I am excited about expanding our ability to produce energy from El Estero. It's both a savings of cost in the long run and also just a wise investment in our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have public comment. There are questions first from... You have a question? Mr. Francisco, do you want to... Go ahead, Mr. Francisco, and then Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Toth, I just wanted to clarify at the very end of the agenda report, it talks about 4,500 kilowatt hours per day electricity generated. Is that the total output from the digester after the fog is added, or is that just the fog fraction itself?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Francisco, I apologize, but at this time, I just don't have the technical answer.
Sorry to spring it on you at the last minute. It just occurred to me, so.
You could get back to
We can get that another
with
time,
that,
sure.
with that would be fine at a later time.
I think the operational and the most important portion is that it's a payback period of 4 years, meaning after 4 years we start gaining from the investment.
I'm not worried about the payback period. I want to understand how much potential electricity can be generated. Thank you.
Okay, we can get that information at some offline afterwards. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, what's the current fog hauling situation for our city? Do we track those folks? Is it a supervised, controlled system, or what's the nature of fog hauling now? Do we know?
Well, fog haulers in town, like Marburg.
But Marburg is currently hauls to Fresno or to landfills.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Councilman White. Marburg and other larger haulers we have permits with through our industrial waste pretreatment compliance program. There may be some haulers from outside of our jurisdiction that travel up here, collect waste from private restaurants, from private businesses, and then transport that material again out of the city of Santa Barbara that we don't regulate. But local entities that are working within the city of Santa Barbara, we do.
So we don't have full control over that system at this point. There's restaurant owners can negotiate with folks outside the area, or just it's kind of I'm sort of in the back of my mind I'm sort of thinking of the less happy situations where they're unlicensed and unqualified haulers that end up offloading the stuff in inappropriate ways and so forth.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, we regulate the restaurants here in town, so we have pretreatment inspection of the restaurant entities themselves to ensure that they're abiding by regulations associated with getting their grease traps or grease interceptors pumped on a regular basis. But to my knowledge, we don't regulate out of town or out of city, out of county grease haulers that contract with a private restaurant and then pick up the material here and take it out of the city.
Yeah. Thank you. And then second is the numbers that we're talking about for the full capacity are operating at 20,000 gallons of fog. That would be serving the region. Is that right? The South Coast region. So the thought would be that this facility could Goleta Carpinteria, et cetera, and would be competitive and so forth.
Madam Mayor,
that's the thought.
Councilmember White, yes, the larger number, the 20,000 gallons per day, is a larger number, regional, including communities outside of the city of Santa Barbara. Again, we estimate approximately 5,000 gallons per day is generated within the city of Santa Barbara, so we could become a resource to other communities that way. And if this pilot project is successful, it would be a win-win situation for restaurant owners, the community, and in other local communities as well.
It does sound like that, and if you do come back with more information on that, I'd appreciate seeing what the finances, if just some crude outline of how this would be more competitive and cost-effective and so forth. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hotchkiss, did you have a question?
I do. A couple of questions. Thanks. So when we say successful, we're talking about, does it make money for us?
Define success.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, I've been schooled in government's not making money or generating revenue, but rather trying to defray other costs of government service. And so this would be a win-win for the city in that when we ultimately generate enough electricity at the El Estero treatment plant to absorb any additional gas created by this FOG project or successors, then it would be even a better win for the treatment plant and then ultimately the community, because we'd be defraying what would otherwise be cost to us to operate the wastewater treatment plant.
I'm not dead sure I understood that. I think what you're saying is yes to my question in a governmental way.
I think he's saying that it would reduce the cost of running the wastewater treatment plant because the gas would be converted to energy to run the plant.
Okay, fair?
Yes, sir.
Do businesses save money this way?
Well, Madam Mayor, Councilman Hotchkiss, it's hopeful that by offering an alternative locally to fog haulers to reduce their costs by not having to transport this material to distant locations, they would be able to then save restaurant owners or somehow defray increases to their costs. That is, they wouldn't have to increase their costs as the economy moves forward with hauling costs, and that ultimately the community would enjoy the benefit of restaurant owners not having to increase their per plate cost.
Okay, well, I don't really understand this then. Right now, how does it work? When the tank gets full, they call and say, hey, we got some grease for you?
Yes, ideally that's the way it works, and Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, that's the way it works. And with that, by virtue of our own FOG program inspections of restaurants, we have got a pretty good idea as to the production of grease that comes out of these restaurants. So between us regulating the restaurant and the restaurant owner knowing how much fog material he's producing, he has got a regular route set up with a private grease hauler to come and routinely clean their grease trap or grease interceptor, typically monthly or quarterly or semi-annually.
And he's paying for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, would he continue to pay for this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so maybe not, whether it helps him. How often do we haul right now, would you say? Or is it just up to whenever that particular restaurant requests it?
That's a private sector activity.
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, you answered the question about saving money. Does this require any increased staffing, or can we absorb this?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, no, we're absorbing this cost with our existing staff. It's being added to their task of duties to do.
Great, thank you.
Okay. We'll move to public comment. Robert Burke.
Madam Mayor, council members, I did not know this was on the agenda, so I'm speaking off the top of my head. I may have some experience in this area, I may not. May I direct a question to staff?
Just ask the question and we can then ask.
Okay. Is this going to, will the grease that is being hauled be only from the traps, or will it go to the grease bin Also, from the grease bin, the large container that you sometimes see behind the restaurant. The reason for my question is I had a 1978 Mercedes diesel that I converted to veggie oil. And so for 2 to 3 years, I did not pay for any fuel. And if this proposal is to expand beyond just the grease trap that is in the ground and also make restaurant owners sign a contract with the city or whatever, or be regulated by a city code, then the very active and present culture of people who run their car on veggie oil would be disturbed and eliminated. And the contractual relationship, whether it's informal or formal, it's usually informal, between the driver, such as I, and the restaurateur would be, these people who are able to economically drive their cars would be forced to go to the pump to pay for money. The reality is that very few restaurants offer quality oil that can be distilled into fuel. Most of the restaurants, the oil has too much fat in it for a person to take that into their garage and filter it. I mean, I've done this myself, so I'm speaking from personal experience. So usually only those restaurants that use very little fat, in their fryer that they then dump in the canister can be used. And these are hotly fought for. When the price of diesel went from $2 to $3.50 and more, where I used to be able to go and maybe, suck up 10 to 50 gallons, it was gone by the time I got there. So, and this is a cottage industry. It's not under regulation, but it is a concern that I wanted to express for the other citizens who were not here. I apologize for not being well versed because I did not know it was on the agenda, but I did want to bring that citizens could be adversely affected by it.
Okay.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Mr. Toth, do you want to comment on that or answer the question?
Madam Mayor, council members, I know our citizens will be delighted to know that we're really taking only brown grease that comes out of certain kitchen appurtenances and goes directly into the sewer lateral, where it is then collected by the grease trap or interceptor. This pilot project, nor any successor project that I'm aware of, would contemplate taking any yellow grease or the more highly prized waste grease from restaurants that could be used for alternative fuel sources like diesel fuel. This would not be taking any of that. It will just be taking grease that otherwise would be going into a grease trap to keep it from going into the sewer system. And to answer the other question on sustainability, the 4,500 kilowatt hours per day would be what could be achieved if this additional digester gas that's created from the fog injection program were to occur. So we would anticipate generating as much as 35 to 40,000 standard cubic feet per day of additional digester gas, and that would translate into potentially this 4,500 kilowatt hours per day additional energy.
And so that's for the pilot project? Okay.
That's assuming approximately 5,000 gallons per day of fog material being digested in the digester.
Oh, so that would be at the end point, not the pilot project? Because
No.
the 5,000 is the total from the city, right?
The we anticipate as a part of this pilot project, Madam Mayor and Councilman Francisco, we anticipate being able to process anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 gallons per day.
Oh, okay.
In this pilot project.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. House?
Well, just a couple comments. One, so if I understand this, the cutting costs of the operations, responsibly disposing of this material here in town instead of shipping it away to somebody else to deal with, and increasing revenue that can be used for the operations of our plants. Those are the three main goals. And it seems so consistent with our the direction that we're going in the city, everywhere from our putting photovoltaic on top of our repair maintenance yard, all the way to these fuel cells. It looks like we're going to be providing or producing probably more gas than can actually be used by the fuel cells during this program, this part of the program. So my guess is you'll have to destroy or just get rid of that gas in a responsible way as well. Do you anticipate that there will be a time where we could generate more energy by adding another fuel cell or going after a grant for something like that? What do you think?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember House, definitely. I mean, this pilot project is really to investigate the quality and the quantity of the gas that we can produce. If we generate more than we can use, of course, right now we would have to flare that gas, but we would establish a threshold and, equate to how much material that we're bringing in, how much that actually equates in our plant process to generated gas. And then from there, we can start developing a larger project and incorporate other, generation devices.
Good, and I understand that the fuel cells don't work. They're not burning the gas in order to create the energy. They're doing it in a different way that doesn't require sort of an incineration kind of method.
They work similar to a battery. It's like a proton exchange system. It uses hydrogen as a fuel and generates electricity through a chemical process.
Well, to have waste like this become something of value to us is just, just from a policy perspective, I want to commend you for taking this to the next level. It seemed like the idea of having those, the first fuel cell, the second fuel cell, award-winning, really appreciated, and then to be able to reach out a little further like this. And I would bet that ultimately there will be some kind of savings to the restaurants themselves who are generating this kind of material, because the costs, as we know, most of our folks doing hauling in or hauling out are adding fuel surcharges on top of their base rate. They have a base rate that's very competitive, but then you get that extra fuel surcharge on top of it. If they can keep it local, it would seem there'd be a pretty direct benefit to our local businesses. So anyway, I just really commend you for what you're doing, and thank you for keeping this this flame alive, so to speak, moving in this direction. Thank you so much.
Hey, Ms. Self?
Thank you. You were mentioning that you weren't going to be adding employees, but that it took 20 hours of maintenance. Was this a week? So is this going to be overtime hours or?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember House.
That's okay.
Self.
A lot of questions. That's fine.
The maintenance hours were estimated to be something on the order of 20 hours per month. And what we're hoping to do is just to fold that into our existing maintenance staff's tasks so that they can perform that as a normal part of their work. Now, that's right. We have to juggle our resources and we have to be more productive to do that. But within the plant staffing, we believe we can find the resources to do that with our existing staff. The operations side, we estimate as much as 60 hours per month of operations staff. Most of that time would be probably involved with coordinating the actual delivery of the fog materials with the grease hauler, and with the fog hauler. And it is an additional burden to staff, but there again, we believe that we can absorb that with our current routines and operations.
Thank you. I have one other question. What is the operational life of this system? It's probably too new to know exactly, but what is the projection?
Well, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Self, we're not sure. I mean, the pilot project is 2 years, but from our own experience with other unit processes, typically they last much longer than that. We believe if there is an expansion to this program, we would use the existing equipment that's there and then add to it. So it could be with the proper design and the proper materials being installed that this could have a much longer useful life than 2 years.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams?
So it's your guys' analysis that not including the electricity generation, that this produces about $100,000 worth of revenue per year from hauling, essentially from our share of the hauling?
That was a very rough calculation that we did, but yes, that's what we were assuming would be a revenue based on a 7-cent tip fee, which is not yet negotiated.
So, I mean, I think this is in answer really to Councilmember Hotchkiss' question, which I thought was a good question, which is, are we going to make money from this? And even if we don't include the costs that we save from generating electricity that defrays our electricity costs at El Estero, we're looking at a potential large amount of money in the tipping fees. Obviously we hope that those will be slightly less than the market is currently, so that some of this benefit is shared by local business owners. And I'm sure Mario, if that's the person that you're negotiating, will try to do that, because he always tries to undercut the competition in some way or another, in a way that I think benefits the environment. So, but this is a marketplace that has, what, 20 or more haulers in the marketplace right now?
I actually don't know specifically how many, but yeah, quite a few.
So the potential is also if the local hauler then reduces the cost on that, then that might signal to their competitors that they would have to compete with that at some level too.
And to note that Marburg is also hoping to extend their on-site pretreatment to other haulers as a boon for them to not have to haul all the way to Fresno and then amass more market share there too. So it will be kind of a win-win for even amongst the local haulers.
Great. Sounds like a good project to me, and a lot of benefits for both our financial bottom line and the environment.
Sounds like potentially it's a huge transportation savings for the haulers. Mr. Hotchkiss.
And I was just going to make the motion.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Williams.
I'll make the motion to approve A and B.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sure. We have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
Two questions. Projection, just from the rough figures that you put here, we need to go out 4 years before we're going to get a cost recovery. So I'm a little worried when you say, well, we hope it goes beyond 2 years. So can we get a little reassurance on that?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, you have our assurance on that.
Okay, good. Second question. Regarding the member of the public's question, which I thought was great and recognizes a real market need, will restaurants that have the quality oil that he's talking about still be able to sell that, market that to local people who might want to run their Mercedes on biofuel?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, I don't think it's regulated by us at this time.
Okay, so they're free to operate in the marketplace. Thank you.
Okay, lots of questions, lots of interest. We look forward to having this come back. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, moving on to Council Member Committee assignment reports. Just as a reminder, this is an opportunity to, if you'd like to bring up a public meeting that happened between last meeting and this meeting, just give a show and tell, but not to talk about philosophies or new ideas that are not on the agenda. I will bring up one, which was as part of my role on Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, SBCAG. I am the alternate to LOSAN, which is the public agency that looks at the rail corridor from San Diego all the way up to San Luis Obispo. I am the alternate to Supervisor Carbajal and attended their meeting last Wednesday. And just the big item that was approved last week was they updated their bylaws, which for the first time acknowledges that in order to have a quorum of LOSAN, you needed to have at least one member of LOSAN North, which covers Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis Obispo counties, present. In the past, that was not the case, and so, which is good for us. That means our voices in terms of the north part of the corridor is going to be heard at every meeting in order to make a quorum. So I thought that was good news. Any other? Mr. Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last week at the regular monthly meeting of the Central Coast Water Authority, or CCWA, responsible for the State Water Project, usually these meetings are pretty non-controversial. I mean, but at this particular meeting, there was actually a subject on which people disagreed, and that was the request from the CCWA's legal counsel for a pay increase. And I am happy to report that I voted against it on behalf of the city of Santa Barbara, as did Montecito Water District. Unfortunately, we were in the minority.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Williams. You just want conflict, right? No, I'm just teasing. Just teasing. Mr. Williams.
Mr. Hotchkiss and myself, as the two liaisons to the Lodging Association, represented the city last week as well as several others of you came as well to the regular meeting of the Greater Santa Barbara Lodging Association. We had a very good report both from Mr. Armstrong and his counterpart at the county on the economic challenges and revenue challenges that the city faces. And we also, many of us attended the annual Chamber of Commerce luncheon last week, which I thought the most important takeaway from Mr. Cushman was business is great. Well, I hope it's going to be great. And to buy local and to give a kid a job, which I thought was a great refrain for people to remember.
Thank you. Okay, we have 2 closed sessions if you want to read those.
Item number 13, conference with legal counsel pending litigation, and item number 14, conference with labor negotiator.
Okay, and I believe we will adjourn from there. We don't need to, and are we adjourning? We are not adjourning, as it says on the agenda, to 922 State Street, because, is that correct? Because that appeal has been withdrawn. Is that right? We got that notice. Okay. Thank you. See you next week.
Rest your head on my shoulder.